Wete Sodales. So let's talk about virtual assessment again. And I made you guys another video because I realized something yesterday after I made the first one. I realized that a lot of us are struggling because we think the situation is one way, but it's actually kind of a different way. And that's a thing that we'll talk about both in the live Zoom sessions and in some other things that we can do after that. But I think it's really important to just go ahead and get it out there now because it's really hard to know where you're going, to figure out how to get there, if you don't know where you are right now. It's the difference between us old people looking at the map and thinking, okay, there's where I'm going, but I have no idea where I am, versus, now when you have a GPS and the GPS says, here's where you are. But then there's that terrible feeling when you get out your phone and you're looking at the GPS, you're looking at your Maps app, and it says, no service. What do you do then? So I loved these pictures because how many different flowers are there? Are there 3? Are there 2? Or is this a close-up of that and there's just 1? I don't know. I think there are 3. Maybe it's 1 flower at 3 different points in its life cycle. But it really spoke to me. And I thought, sometimes it's like that, right? And then I thought about a thing that I just learned about last week called the Cynefin approach. And the Cynefin approach is about different ways that the world can be and what you can do, the kinds of ways that you can approach problem solving in different kinds of situations. And I looked at the Cynefin approach and I said, oh, that's why it seems so totally overwhelming right now. So I wanted to tell you guys about it. Everybody wants this, right? Everybody wants what they call simple and obvious in the Cynefin model. Because when things are simple and obvious, best practice is clear. And that's what teachers want, right? We want best practice. We want to know what is the best platform, what is the best tool, what is the best approach. But that's only an answerable question in a situation that's simple and obvious on the Cynefin model. One time, I was in the emergency room, and I was there for a pretty good reason, because I had an emergency. And on that day, I was reminded of the term alert and oriented times 4, because of course one of the things that they do is they find out, are you alert? Are you conscious? Yeah, I was. How well are you in touch with the situation? Do you know who you are? Yes, I did. Do you know where you are? Yeah, I was at the emergency room at this hospital. Do you know what day it is? Yeah, I knew that. It was August such and so 2017. Do you know why you're here? Yes, I definitely knew why I was here. So they didn't have to worry about certain things, and then they were able to deal with figuring out what was wrong. I was in the hospital for a few days, and it was expensive, but then I was a whole lot better. But when you're alert and oriented times 4, you know who you are, where you are, what's going on, when it is. You may or may not know, like, why in the big picture sense, but you may not really have to ask. So it's not that hard to figure out how to solve whatever the problem is. And that's school in normal times, right? Or that's our vision of school, how schools are supposed to be. But we all know sometimes it's complicated. And when it's complicated in the Cynefin model, best practice, like one right way to do things, may or may not be possible, but there's a range of what they call good practice. You may feel like you're alert and oriented times 3. You know who you are. You know what's happening. You know where you are, but when is a little bit fuzzy. When am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Figuring out how is not overwhelming, but it's complicated. And it is kind of hard because there's several good options, right? And nobody can tell you which one is right. That's a lot of schools in kind of normal times, right? If you think about it, if you're honest with yourself. But sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's not just complicated. Sometimes it's actually inherently complex. And best is out of reach. And good, There's a lot of things that could be good, but there's a thing that is possible that's called emergent practice. You can try stuff and see if it works. And if it works, you do more of it. And if it doesn't work, you try something else. And you might feel like you're alert and oriented times two. You know who you are. You know kind of what you're doing. But you aren't quite sure about the details of the situation. You don't know when it's going to get better. You really don't know how to get there. And how is not beyond just hard. It is difficult and complicated and hard. And one of the things that I like to say to people is it doesn't have to be difficult and complicated and hard. But I realize that's not true because in an emergent complex situation, it kind of is difficult, complicated, and hard. It doesn't have to stay that way, but it sure does feel that way. Unfortunately, I mean, you know how these things are, right? There's always four. And there's four in the Cynefin model too. And step four, which is where a lot of us are right now, is not just complicated. It's not just complex. It's actually chaotic. And all you can do is try something and see if it works. But realize it might not work, and then you might have to try something else. So the only possibility is what they call novel practice. Now, your goal when you're in a chaotic situation is to get it back to being complex or complicated, right? So it's not overwhelming. But the only way to get there is with this novel practice thing. And all you know, you feel like you may be alert and oriented times one or possibly even times zero. We know who we are. I think we do. If you feel like I don't even know who I am anymore as a teacher, that's a sign that we can get you out of that. But we're not quite sure what we're doing, what the context is, the where. When and why and how, I mean, those are just like not even a factor, right? Because we're just almost completely overwhelmed. And what we don't want is to lose sight of who we are and not even be alert and end up in then what the Cynefin model calls disorder. But we all know what that feels like, right? We don't want to be there. So if it seems like you're in a chaotic or even just a complicated or a complex time, it doesn't have to be that way, but we cannot get out of those situations alone. I mean, in that day in August 2017, if I had tried to solve my health crisis by myself, that probably wouldn't have worked, right? I needed to go to see the doctor. And I needed other people there to help diagnose the situation and forget the treatment plan. Similarly for us, what we've got to do in these challenging, difficult, complex, and chaotic times is we got to stop trying to be the hero. We got to stop trying to be the only hero. And remember that even in those hero stories, the hero always has help. So we've got to be each other's help. We've got to be each other's community. We've got to support each other. And if you'd like that support, I hope you'll come to one of those Zoom sessions or just get in touch. I'll make some more videos and those will be available and we'll continue this conversation. But I wanted to make sure that I shared this with you guys today. And I want to thank you all for everything, for the work that you're doing in chaotic times, for caring for your students, for caring and loving the work that you do. And we're gonna find a solution together. So on that note, let me say Walete Sodales, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you guys really soon.